Good morning, Grace Fellowship. We are really glad that you're here as we enter into this 3-week series entitled No Ordinary Family. We are talking about the human family today. Next Sunday, we're talking about God's family. And then the following week, we're talking about the technology family. And I think that'll be interesting to all of us. Before we get into that, we are launching into the fall. And I'm very excited about what the fall has in store for us at Grace Fellowship. And one of those things is connect groups. If you're seeking connection, need connection, longing for connection, which we all are created to connect with one another, connect groups is the one vehicle, the one main way that we connect with other like-minded believers. And so if you're interested in that, we're particularly looking for people that would host groups in their home, but you can put that on your connection card. Just write the word host, and we'll get you all the information that you need. You don't have to be a seasoned Christian or a biblical scholar to have people in your home. You just have to be available and willing to meet with others and walk the journey of faith together. And so we're excited about launching into connect groups in the middle of September. So for now, we're talking about the ordinary family, and when you think who wants an ordinary family, but all of us have ordinary families. What is ordinary? We're not quite sure. Most of us want a healthy family, right? We want a strong family. We want a deeply connected family, a close family, a family that gets along, loves each other. You think about the families that we're aware of, and mostly, we watch families on television. Most of our sitcoms are based on families, and does the media really reflect ordinary families, or does the media shape our ordinary families? Who can relate to the Waltons? Anybody remember the Waltons? They were pretty much perfect. The Huxtables, that was one of my favorite families, but they solved all their problems in 30 minutes. Can't relate to that. Anybody remember the Connors? Yeah, so that family needed prayer. The Bunkers, that was when I was a kid. The Brady Bunch, the Barones. All of these kind of families, are they ordinary families? What is ordinary? This morning, my message is entitled The Biblical Family. Many of us in this room don't want an ordinary family. We want a biblical family. God created the family. He put us in families. He calls Jesus followers the family of God. And so the Bible, what God has to say about the family, certainly shapes the kind of family God intends. But the Bible, here's the thing, the Bible isn't shy about the family, certainly in the way that it actually exists. We don't want an ordinary family, we want a biblical family. But so what biblical family do you want? Do you want Adam and Eve's family? That messed up the family from the very get-go? Do you want Abraham's family or Jacob's family where parental favoritism stirred up, sibling rivalry? Do you want the family of David who just literally fell apart, competing with each one? What's ordinary about every family, friends, is that every family is broken. You are broken. That means your family, to some extent, is broken. And so what does God say about that? How can we mend some of the brokenness that we experience in family? We're looking at Ephesians chapter 6 this morning. If you want to get that ready in your own Bible or the Bible that's provided, or go to the website that's on your screen if you want to take notes. What is ordinary? A lot of times when I talk about the family, I'm always looking at statistics and what's the shape and the character of the American family today. And there's a lot of things that tell us about the current American family and the challenges to that family: teen sexuality, drug use, college binge drinking, frat parties, the broken divorce, all that kind of stuff. We just sent our kids off to school this week. And I thought, if I share some of these statistics, you're going to want to grab your kid and make them live in the basement for 20 years. So, let's not start off with all the negativity. Let's just start off with the assumption that all of us are broken and our families need help. So I'm going to forego the statistics this morning and just ask the question, what does God want us to know and do about our families? How can you and I construct the model God intended for the family? So this morning, I'm going to talk about 3 stages and 3 principles that the Bible guides us through about making our ordinary family a little bit extraordinary that reflects the character of God in our families. And Ephesians 6 is a classic passage to do that. And so I want to present 3 stages and how to parent in those 3 particular stages. I'm going to talk about childhood. And that childhood is from day 1 to around 12 years old. socially, that's kind of the childhood age range. I'm going to talk about teenagers, beyond 12 up to through age 19 up to 20, and then adulthood 20 and beyond, and what the family should look like in those particular stages, and how we as parents need to enter into that. So let's get started. Ephesians chapter 6 starts this way: children. That's ages 0 to 12, obey through 12. Obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Verse 2, honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Verse 4, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. So 3 stages. Let's go back. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. A human being from day 1 through the age of 12. The Bible tends to bear out this childhood stage. The first mention of Jesus was when he was 12 years old. Jewish culture, bar mitzvahs a child at 12. It's a transition age. Question, before you get to that age, while you're moving through those years, what should a child be doing? What does that verse tell us that a child should be doing? Obeying. How many of you right now have human beings in your home that should be obeying you? Okay, so we've got a lot of parents of young people. Okay, let's move on to verse 2. Honor your father and mother. This could be applied to that next phase of humanhood, because teenagers are not just learning to obey, but they're also learning to honor. Honor and respect, respecting authority, respecting those over you. This is a big deal to teaching our teenagers how to honor one another, respect authority, respecting your parents. How many of you have human beings in your house who are need to be learning how to respect and honor? Okay, so we've got those. And then verse 3, it says that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land, okay? And so this is going beyond that, so that life in the future may go well for you. This is moving into that adult phase where you're starting to branch out on your own. And that's the promise of obeying and honoring your parents. First of all, that life will be long. We talk about long life, especially parents. First of all, why would you want to live long if life isn't going well? And then as parents with children who are not doing well, you may not want them to live long. So anyway, you have this sort of thing. So parents with children, you need prayer. We'll talk about that. You need energy and resources and support. You need prayer. Parents of teenagers, you need prayer, but you also need counseling, because how do you navigate all the changes that an adolescent goes through in that phase? And then parents of adults, you're out of prayer. You're out of luck, because you're done. What else can you do? Well, you're not totally done. We'll talk about that as well. But that's the three phases, the 3 stages that Paul's talking about in this family structure. And so what does he tell us to do in these particular stages? Here's the 3 things. Number 1, you need to train your child. If you have a child, 0 to 12, through 12, what is the thing that you need to be doing? You need to be training them. Proverbs 22 says, train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. What we need to understand about Proverbs is that they are not promises, they are probabilities. You read this verse, and a lot of parents have this angst and this anxiety and this even guilt because I feel like I did everything right, and yet they don't love the Lord. Friends, Proverbs are probabilities, not promises. It's just telling you that if you train a child in the way that he should go, the probabilities increase. The potential of that turning out to be a reality goes up. But you need to train them. You need to train them. When you're parenting children, that stage has its own unique challenges and pressures and stressors. The temptation, I think, in that stage is not to enjoy the stage, but to endure the stage. I remember those days when we were training children, if we could just get them through diapers. No, if we could just get them walking, if we could just get them to use their words, if we could just, if they would just be adults, if we could just speed up this process. Because I just remember those days, if we could just get their shoes on. Let's, come on, let's go. We gotta be there. It's a miracle that you get anywhere at all, properly clothed. Not just the kids, but you. It's just, it's chaotic and it's pressured. And I'm going to throw my wife under the bus because I refuse to take all the guilt on my own. And some of you have already heard this story, but I've been in ministry for almost 45 years now. We have never gone to church together because of my ministry and her ministry. And the thing, we've driven 2 separate cars to church for over 40 years. And more than once when we were parenting children, we have each left, both in our individual cars, and gotten home and looked at each other and asked, where are our children? More than once, okay? And while we were blaming each other for our respective irresponsibility, inevitably the phone rings, and I told Ron, I said, if it's DCFS, do not answer the phone. Sure enough, somebody was left at church, and they say to us, it's 12 o'clock, do you know where your children are? And we know where they are, we just don't know who's responsible for them, And I just remind all of you, having told that story, Mary, the mother of God, left Jesus at church and for 3 days didn't know where he was. Childhood is difficult. And those of you who have been through that stage know, just combing their hair and brushing their teeth and just getting them into bed, the temptation is to just get through it. And while we're just getting through it and enduring it, sometimes we miss the point of the training that needs to happen in that stage. You can't just get through it. Children need to be trained. Discipline is the word that the Bible uses. Let me give you 3 words that for effective discipline. Number 1, you need to be clear with children. You can never be too clear with children. I told one of my kids not to throw her doll in the pool, so she threw rocks in the pool. I said, no, that you're not getting it. Nothing in the pool. Don't throw anything in the pool. Do not hit your sister with a plastic bat. So she hit her with the doll. So, you can never, being clear with a child is training them to know. And then the second word is consistent. I think this is probably the toughest challenge. If you lay out a consequence for misbehavior, you need to follow through with that consequence. How many of us as parents have compromised on the consequence? And you know what that does? Nothing creates more confusion in the life of a child than the inconsistency of boundaries and consequences that we are not, say what you mean what you say. My mom would say it 1,000 times. My dad said it once. He was not frustrated. So consistency and then compassion. Clarity, consistency, and compassion. Never correct in anger. Never use condescension or shame. Do not use their self-worth against them. Years ago, someone said to me, if you never hug your child, never hit your child. I mean, there's been a debate on corporal punishment for a couple of generations now. Friends, the Bible teaches it. Spanking is biblical, but you have to choose what is most effective in your family, and you have to do it right in order for it to be effective. And this psychologist said, if your child's only experience of your hands is correction, then that's probably not the right strategy for your family. Children need to know that they are loved before they are corrected, and they need to know that they are loved after they are corrected. Your child needs to be trained in the way that they should go, whatever consequence you use. They need to know that you're using that consequence as a training mechanism, that you're disciplining them. Why? Because you want their life to go well. You want their life to go well. You're training them that what they do and what they don't do, how they obey and how they disobey, is destructive not only to others but to themselves. It's prohibiting life from going well for them. You're training them. Yes, it may be a timeout chair today, but 20 years from now, it could be prison. So learn you're training them to obey. Train your child. That's number 1. Second, teach your teen. Now we're moving from age 12 up through age 19 and 20. Deuteronomy chapter 6 says this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall what? You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit at home and when you walk by the way, when you lie. He's talking about the lifestyle, the journey, the routine of life, how, as you're doing life together with your kids. When you rise up, this is called the Shema. This is the Hebrew Shema. This is Israel's confession of faith. This was the mandate for parents to help their children understand, to teach them who God was and who God made them to be, to teach them, to lay a foundation of relationship with their God. Later on, Moses, in this same passage, outlines the strategy of imparting this faith, this teaching to their children. And he says in verse 20, when your son asks you in time to come, what is the meaning of the testimonies and the statutes and the rules that the Lord our God has commanded you? I mean, why are you teaching me this stuff? Why are we having this? Why are you bringing me to church? Why am I sitting why am I learning this stuff? Then you shall say to your son, you have an opportunity now to have a conversation. You train a child, you teach a teen. When they are children, they need to be told. When they are a teen, they need to be taught. And one of the best ways to teach them is have conversations with them. Now, granted, this adolescent stage is wide. The conversation that you have with a 13-year-old is going to be much different than the conversation you have with the 19-year-old. But it's the conversation, it's the relationship that you're having. Here's the deal. With a child, you have all authority in heaven and on earth. They're children. And so you tell them what to think. But with a teen, you have to teach them how to think. Because they're learning, they're thinking for themselves now. So how do you help them think for themselves? When they're not consulting you or submitting to you, your job is to guide them through the thinking process, disciplining them in thinking. I threw Mary, the mother of God, under the bus a second ago, so I need to go back to her. Do you remember that story? Mary and Joseph with Jesus had gone to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. They leave town. Jesus stays behind. They come back looking for him, and they find him in the temple. In verse 47 of Luke 2, it says this, and all who heard him, all the teachers of the law, they're surrounded around him, or he's with them. They were amazed at his understanding and his answers. And we remember this part of the story that Jesus just impressed them so much with all that he knew and all that his wisdom. But what happened in the previous verse, in verse 46, it says this. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teaching, doing what? Listening and asking. Jesus wasn't there telling. Jesus was there listening in asking. If there's any teenagers in the room, let me tell you, I love you very much. We all love you. Piece of advice, if you want to impress your superiors, your parents, your teachers, those that you work for, that sort of thing, ask questions. We know you don't know everything. You may not know that. So ask questions. Seek understanding. There are people who have gone ahead of you. And so this is exactly what Jesus did. He was listening and he was asking questions. Now, on the other end of this, parents, how many times have you been too busy and too stressed to entertain the question? Because I said so. It's so much easier and quicker. But what that does in the short term does damage in the long term. Again, a child, you tell them what to think, what to do, where to go. They only know you. So if you're into tyranny, parenting a 4-year-old is great for you. But when the child becomes a teen and begins to experience a little bit of independence and start thinking for themselves, because I said so, it just doesn't work for them. The content stays the same. We're training, you're disciplining them to love the Lord their God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. But the strategy to impress this upon their lives changes drastically. You tell a child what to think, but you've got to teach a teen how to think. How many of you are into math? Numbers people here? Okay. First service, I didn't have anybody. So pray for the first service. Okay. Math is all about rules. Math is about principles. You have to do math right. Otherwise, math will not work. That's the thing about math. 2 plus 2 equals 6 minus 2 equals, say it out loud. Don't be embarrassed. You know this, okay? 2 times 2 equals, okay? 12 divided by 4 equals 3, right? It's not 4, right? So, you can't be mindless. You just can't take, you've got to think through these things because you can't bend the rules in math. Math will not work without the rules in place. When I was in school, and yes, we had math books when I was in school, and my math book, when at the end of every chapter, you had problems to work on. And I don't know if it's this way now, but in my math book, at the end of the book, you could go to that chapter, and it would have the even numbered answers. So if you were having trouble with if you were having problems with problem 2, you could go to the back of the book and get the answer to problem 2. That was awesome. The problem with that is that when you just give somebody the answer, it doesn't help them resolve the problem. It doesn't help them learn how to resolve the problem. You get that? You understand that? And so, I remember as a teenager, I would just say, just give me the answer. Just give me the answer. Any good teacher will not just give the answer. Any good teacher will help discipline the student in how to find the answer. How to find the answer. And so it works both ways. Jesus impressed the teachers, not just because he had wisdom and knowledge, but because he listened and he asked questions. And get this, Jesus, the greatest teacher in the history of the world, was a master at asking questions. When you read the Gospels, you will discover that Jesus asked far more questions than he answered. There were some questions that he refused to answer. Over 300 questions he posed to individuals. So parents, think about this in your teenager, your relationship with that teen, who at this stage in their lives, they're questioning and challenging authority, they're pushing the limits of their freedom, they're trying to think for themselves. And so how would your relationship with them improve if you spent more time asking them questions instead of giving them the answers? So you want to go to that party tonight. Do you have an exit strategy for when that party gets out of hand? What are you going to do when that party gets out of hand? What do you think makes a good friend? Is what that person did to you, would that be a good friendship to you? How would you define good friendship? This is how you treated them. Is that how you want to be treated? What does a good friendship look like to you? This is what you're choosing right now. How is that working for you? Do you think the decision that you're making now is going to affect your future? What assurances do you have that this will turn out well for you? If you were the parent in this situation, okay, we're dealing with this now. We're struggling with this right now. Or your friend is going through this right now, and this is what his parents are doing right now. Do you think that's a good parenting strategy? If you were the parent, what would you be doing? What would you tell me if I was the kid? Now, that's just you use your own questions. But I just know that questions are less threatening and more inviting. Questions open the mind. Telling closes the mind. Questions indicate an interest that you actually care about them and what they think. Questions create a conversation, and that's what you want with a teenager. And questions and conversations create influence. And that's the thing about teenagers. With a child, you have complete control and very little influence. They have to be told, but the older they get and the more that they think for themselves, your control has to transfer into influence. Rules have to give way to relationship. And so you train a child, you teach a teen, and then after they're done, then your job is done, right? Well, not yet, okay? You're still a parent. Number 3, you need to trust your adult. You need to trust your adult. The Bible seems to indicate 2 major transitions in life, in the life of a human being. At the age of 12, they enter into this teaching phase. At the age of 20, they enter into this phase called adulthood. Exodus chapter 20 tells us that every 20-year-old man was now expected to give to the temple. In Numbers chapter 1, it tells us that every 20-year-old was now inscripted into the military. And then the most familiar is that, you remember when the Israelites went to the promised land and refused to go in? And God sent them back out into the wilderness for 40 years. Everyone at the age of 20 and up bore the consequence for that refusal, for that disobedience. So it seems to, in biblical culture, that at the age of 20, you are now accountable and responsible for your own life. You cannot put this on your parents. You cannot blame your parents. You cannot escape the responsibility of your life. So the question is, what's the place of you as a parent in the life of an adult child? A parent can be a noun and a parent can be a verb. I was once I'm still a parent, but I no longer parent. Okay, I will never stop being a parent, but I've got to stop parenting. That's what empty nesting is all about. And so, are you familiar with the term helicopter parents? I won't ask you to raise your hand if you are one. I'll just, parent. This is basically the inability or the unwillingness to release. You're controlling the child, you're manipulating the child, you're making sure that what you want for that child is happening, what you want that child to do is happening. And again, the older that child gets, the less control you have over that child, and you don't want to give up that control. A parent who doesn't know how to stop parenting and release that child into adulthood. Rhonda and I right now are in the early stages of this relationship with both of our children. Katie has been an adult for about 10 years now. She's been on her own, making her own choices. She did not ask us for permission to move all the way to North Carolina. She's an adult. I'm not bitter. She did ask what I thought about it. That's cool. That's the thing, parents of adults. You can encourage them. You can pray for them. You can tell them what you think when they ask, when they want to know what you think. But you cannot tell them what to do. And if I tell them what I think and they don't follow that advice, they're not disrespecting me. They're not dishonoring me. I am no longer the authority in their life. For me, as a follower of Jesus, you know what? You know what I want for them? I don't want them living their life, avoiding disappointing me. I want them to live their life afraid of disappointing Jesus. My authority in their life is done. The authority of Jesus has to take over. And so I would much rather them be in fear of God than in fear of me. And if I have done my job well, if Jesus is now the authority in their lives, then I've got to entrust to God their adulthood. Does that make sense? He's going to do a much better job than I ever did anyway. So here's my goal. Psalm 127, it says, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. A couple of months ago, we landed in Psalm 127, and we got to the end of this psalm that says, he shall not be put to shame. The person building this family, God building this family in this person, what does this mean, he shall not be put to shame? And we talked about ancient culture. In ancient culture, the city gate was the seat of government. I mean, this is where the elders of the city settled judicial matters. If you had a case or a charge, an accusation against someone else, then you brought that case and that argument to the city gates and presented it to the elders. They listened to your case, and they administered justice on your behalf. And so what this psalm is saying is that when that happens to your parent, this is what you want to happen. One of these days, your children are not going to need you. They're not going to need you to be proud of them. They're not going to need you to protect them. They're not going to need you to provide for them, but you're still going to be in relationship with them. And basically what this verse is saying is that at some point in their adult relationship with you, what you are going to want from them is for them to defend your honor and character. You know, we grow up wanting our parents to be proud of us. And there comes a point in the life of a parent that you want our children to be proud of us. And this verse is saying, you want to live a life such, Solomon in this verse is telling parents, give your children a reason to be proud of you. Give your children a reason to be grateful for who you were. Give your children a reason to defend the life and the character that you lived in your life. I've had accountability partners throughout my entire adult life, but I'll tell you, my children have been the greatest source of accountability because I realized that whoever I was in my life, the way that I lived my life, was a major influence in theirs. How I lived out my values, how I imparted truth and love, how I parented them with clarity and consistency and compassion. When I failed them as a parent, the way that I admitted fault and sought forgiveness. I knew that that was going to be the greatest impact of their life. Here's the deal, parents. You cannot pass on what you do not possess. And so you've got to make this personal before you make this relational. To love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And to live that out in such a way that when your control is done and when your influence is over, you have children that pick up on that legacy and call you blessed because of it. So, let's end it this way. We're going to take communion in just a moment, and we're just, ushers, if you want to get ready for that, you can. But how many parents in the room need prayer? Okay, we're all in this together. Whether you're a parent or whether you're not a parent, you're in a family. And we don't want an ordinary family, we want a biblical family. And so as we move into communion and we think about what Jesus has done for us and the grace that we don't deserve, let's thank God for our families, but let's also ask God for the wisdom and the courage that we need to parent and to love each other well in our families. So would you pray with me? Father, we thank you for our families. They weren't perfect. In fact, some of them were quite difficult. And so some of the lessons that we've learned have been because of the hardships and not necessarily because of the blessings. But throughout all the experiences, Father, we pray that the transforming power of your Holy Spirit would so speak to ours and transform ours, that wherever we are now, it is never too late to start doing what is right, so that we would love our children, that we would love our parents well, that we would reflect the character of God in the unit, the family unit that you placed us in. And so as we celebrate communion, Father, remind us of that. Remind us that you have placed us in a family and that the blood of Jesus has united all of us together. Thank you, Father, in Jesus' name.